Graphics don't. Graphics in video games do not matter. I mean this almost wholeheartedly. Having a detailed looking video game with realistic graphics that look like the real world, it doesn't matter in the slightest. I don't think it matters at all. I think when making a game, it should be one of the last things you decide to do. Graphics do not matter. But something very similar does. Ever since video games escaped the second dimension and became a part of our third dimensional space with stuff like the Nintendo 64, PlayStation, and such, the discussion around graphics in video games started once they started or had the possibility to look more like us because they lived in our same dimension. And ever since, I would say, around the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era, I would include GameCube, but nobody's really trying to argue graphics for the GameCube. It became a point in video games to have good graphics, to be using the latest technology of the industry. This especially was prevalent with the inclusion of PC gaming. And it became a point where if your game did not look like the best game out there, or you weren't using the most recent technological advancements in your game's graphic systems, your game was bad, which is absolutely ridiculous. A game is not bad depending on if it has peach fuzz. And don't get me wrong, having a good-looking game, a good-looking and graphical game, is good. It's cool and it's fun, but that is not what should be important. There's so many other things you can argue. Game design, player UX, or player enjoyment of the game. UI, there's so much that goes into a game that graphics don't ultimately matter. But something does, because it doesn't mean you can just ignore graphics outright. Because what does matter is art design. How your game feels to look at, in a sense. Because take for instance Undertale. Undertale is a 2D pixelated game. It does not have the most recent graphics. But if I were to show you any of these screenshots, you could probably tell they were from Undertale, if you just knew about the game and have seen previous screenshots. Because Undertale has a very distinct style. This doesn't just apply to 2D games though, it does also apply to 3D games. Take for instance, well, I've got a Kirby plush here, the newest Kirby game, or Kirby in general. Sure, Kirby's mostly been in a 2D space, but recently 2D's been in a 3D space. It has before as well, and it uses 3D models with some of the more recent games. Kirby has a very distinct style. How Kirby looks, how the rest of the enemies look, how the upgrades look, how the world is designed. It is very similar style that even though Kirby has jumped from the second dimension to the third, it still feels like a Kirby game. Older games also have this design. Sure, at their time they might have been the best looking, but take for instance BioShock, which I've recently decided to play. I've played through the first BioShock and I'm looking at and I'm going to play the second one. But I look at a game like BioShock Infinite, which came out on a completely separate console in a later generation and looks significantly better, but still looks like BioShock, because BioShock has a style. Before you can worry about how good your graphics are going to look, you have to worry about how your game is going to look. Because graphics are temporary. I'll play a game like Red Dead 2, and sure, that horse shit literally looks realistic, but once I'm done, I'm not going to remember the game for the horse shit. Okay, I might remember the game for the horse shit, because not that many games use it, but you catch my drift. Sure, grass looks good, but once the game's off, I've got grass outside, I don't need to worry. I think almost to the point it's almost a detriment to game to have realistic graphics, because sure, it's cool, but I've seen that before. It's called reality. It exists. So, games have to have a very specific style choice. I'll go back again to Red Dead 2. Red Dead 2 graphically is amazing, but I'm not exactly remembering it solely for that. I'm remembering it because of its Western style. The cowboys, the salons, the horses, the horse shit. That is what Red Dead 2's style is, and that's what sticks with me. Because, again, I know what grass looks like. It's cool to see it in my video game, but I am not going to care once the video game's turned off. For a more extreme example, Horizon Forbidden West. I will admit I have never played the games, but I do know the concept of the games, and you're fighting giant robotic dinosaurs. Horizon Forbidden West, or at least Zero Dawn, whatever the recent release is, looks really good. She has peach fuzz. I know that's a meme in the community, but that's an interesting detail. But I'm not going to remember the game for her peach fuzz. I'm going to remember the game because you're fighting giant-ass robot dinosaurs with a bow. That you don't see in real life, and that's what's going to stick with me. Horizon's style. Another example, Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild looks graphically amazing, especially for something like the Switch, which looks like an old Android tablet. But, and granted, something like Breath of the Wild's case, you'll remember it because it's a cool graphical improvement onto the console. But it's Breath of the Wild's cell shading, the way the villages are designed, the differences between Rito Village and the Fish People. There is a design on how those villages are built. That is what sticks with you. And sure, good graphics can go a long way, but it's not just good graphics. Take, for instance, the shirt I'm wearing. One Shot, one of my favorite games of all time. Pixelated in 2D, but has a very distinct art style that sticks with you. It is, I think, a null point. It is cool to talk about good graphics in video games, because it does look cool, and it's nice to see the industry get pushed that far, but it is not necessary. It is ridiculous to bring up a point to say that graphics are a valid point one game has over the other, because I think that's ridiculous. There's always going to be a game that looks better than the other, but it doesn't exactly mean it will play well. Graphics are a good point to bring in complement to the game, and sometimes to a detriment of the game if it's trying to look realistic but fails. But it is not a good arguing point to compare one game to another, because different games will have different art styles, different ways they present themselves, and that is what can distinguish it. An art style is way more important than having good graphics. And that's about all I gotta say. I know this is a point people have argued before, art style over graphics. I just kind of want to ham it home, especially with the modern generation getting more and more advanced. So many people are constantly bringing it up. Another example, Elden Ring. Elden Ring looks really good. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, having good graphics is not bad. The grass in Elden Ring makes me feel like I don't need to touch grass in real life. But Elden Ring also has a distinctive style to it. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. It does look fairly realistic, but something about its fantasy nature still sticks out, and that is what I'm going to remember. Graphics are temporary. Style is forever. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe. I'm gaining quite a few subscribers, so thank you. Maybe we can get famous and I'll start a cryptocurrency. I don't know. Become a crypto bro today. I'm